Hello there, everyone. This is your host, Molly, your everyday Star Wars fan with a special bias towards The Mandalorian. Today, we'll be covering a brief introduction of myself, along with some upcoming Star Wars projects, and the Book of Boba Fett, of course, in depth. So, to begin, well, my name is Molly, if you didn't know that already, as this is called the Mollylorian, and I coined that term because I love the Mandalorian, if that wasn't already obvious as well. I am a college graduate, almost. As of right now, I still have finals week looming over me, but once that's done, by the next time I'm hosting this next Saturday, I will be a college graduate, which is very weird to say. Of course, just my undergrad. The point of this podcast is to just have a space where Star Wars fans that are more casual, maybe aren't as into the universe as they want to be yet, or they're as far into the universe as they want to be, and they just want to have casual discussions about movies and shows and maybe books and stuff. But to be quite honest, I haven't read that many yet. I'm just starting to do my dive into that. So it's just going to be a very laid-back, conversational space where we can just discuss some of these things that we love so much. I thought the best way to introduce myself would be to answer and address some Star Wars related questions, because what better to do on a Star Wars podcast than talk about what my lightsaber color would be. So, yes, I did just spoil the first question. What color would my lightsaber be? Well, if I could choose from any kyber crystal, if I could control what color it gave me, it would be yellow for my overall vibe. I say as I'm wearing a giant yellow sweatshirt, just because I have a pretty sunny disposition, I would say, and I am very positive, so I feel like yellow would really fit my vibe. Plus all the things that they say a yellow lightsaber fits makes sense for me. I think Grogu might have a yellow lightsaber. Not that we're supposed to know that yet, but there was that poster that was Lucasfilm approved. Anyway, yellow for my vibe, but my favorite color is pink, and since that's my favorite color, I feel like it's the best representation of myself. Side note, I'm sorry for any background noise. This mic is not that great. As this is a casual podcast, this is casual podcast equipment, and I got this for probably $15 on Amazon, and I guess it picks up everything, so that's kind of cool, but I also currently live in a dorm room with a very squeaky chair, and people... lots of people, so if you hear background noise, I apologize. My favorite Star Wars show, obviously, The Mandalorian. We will go more in depth on that many times probably on this podcast, but a little bit today and next week as well. My favorite movie is Rogue One, which I feel like maybe that could be controversial because it's not technically Skywalker Saga, but I don't think it's that controversial because Rogue One is, to many Star Wars fans, the movie that can do no wrong, everybody loves Rogue One. I don't think I've ever heard of somebody who doesn't. But, if you don't, that's okay, because we, on this podcast, do not shame each other for our Star Wars opinions. So if that's not your vibe, that's fine. It is what it is, but I would encourage you to give it another rewatch with a fresh mind, because, boy, that movie is just so good. My favorite character is Din Djarin, or casually known as Mando. I think that's also obvious, since my favorite show is The Mandalorian. My second favorite character is probably Obi-Wan Kenobi, by the way, just because I felt like you all should know that. My favorite ship is the Razor Crest. Obviously, if I'm a Mandalorian fan and a Mando fan, the Razor Crest would be my comfort ship. But in terms of ship, one true pairing OTP, it's probably what the fans have deemed Rebel Captain, which is Cassian Andor and Jyn Erso. They deserved better, and I will always be sad about it, but gotta respect that decision because, I guess it did have to happen. My favorite clones are Captain Rex, of course. Maybe I'm a little basic, but who cares, because Dave Filoni snapped when he made Rex. And also Hunter, Sergeant Hunter, from the Clone Wars / The Bad Batch. Again, maybe a little basic, but Hunter is just the Mandalorian animated as a clone. The fact that he's the one that's the closest with Omega and stuff, that's just what makes sense at this point. My favorite book that is canon is Master and Apprentice. It is one of the only books I have read so far that is canon, but I read it this summer and it was excellent. And I'm very, very, very excited for the upcoming Obi-Wan and Anakin book. I think it's coming out next year. I'm pretty sure it's coming out next year. I'm pretty hyped for that. So what exactly is my status of normalcy as a Star Wars fan? I would say, I was raised on Star Wars. Shout out to my dad and my mom. My family was a very Star Wars family. I remember my first movie in the movie theaters, at least the first one I remember, is Revenge of the Sith. I was 5 years old. I'm sorry if that makes you feel either really young or really old. And I remember watching Anakin burn to a crisp between my dad's fingers because he was trying to cover my eyes. Obviously, we did not know that was going to happen, so that's kind of a fun experience. But I don't remember watching any of the first 6 episodes for the first time because throughout my childhood, I was just exposed to them a lot. So I've been a Star Wars fan since day one, quite literally. And I also played a lot of Star Wars video games growing up. So I played the first or second or both Battlefronts when I was like 5. I loved playing on Camino as the clones. And I played a lot of Lego Star Wars too. Definitely into the Lego Star Wars. That was my vibe. That was my thing. So then when the sequel movies started coming out in 2015, I kind of had a little revival because there was a long time without content between then other than the Clone Wars, and I wasn't keeping up with that at that time. And so I watched all the sequel movies, was really excited about them, and Rogue One and Solo as they all came out. And then The Mandalorian came out, and I basically just went down the deep end for sure. So while I've always been a pretty intense Star Wars fan, it was November 12th, 2019, when Disney Plus and The Mandalorian dropped, that I really intensified. So, my Mandalorian brain rot, as I like to call it, it's definitely intense. It is something we will explore and you will see as this podcast evolves. Next week's episode is, I'm kind of giving away what I'm going to say at the end, but it's going to deal a lot with The Mandalorian since I haven't had the space to recap on season 1 and season 2 with you because this is literally the first episode of this podcast. So we're going to be kind of going into that, and there you will probably see, oh yeah, she's definitely watched the show a lot. Season 1 coming out right before quarantine was, not that any of us knew it was going to happen at the time, but I rewatched that show a lot when we were all in our houses in 2020. And I've lost count, but season 1 was probably somewhere around 25 consecutive watches. Consecutive meaning, I don't know if I use that in the right context, but meaning I watched every episode of season 1 all together 25 times. And that's when I started losing count, and I lost count in the winter of 2020, a year ago, and I've definitely watched it again a few times since, so I don't know. And then season 2 is harder for me to measure because I watch the individual episodes a lot in the weeks waiting for the next episode to come out. So like when chapter 9 came out, the first episode of season 2, I rewatched that I think 10 times, not even exaggerating, before chapter 10, the next episode, came out. So I saw season 2, by the time it finished, I had seen each episode like probably 10 times, but never consecutively, or all together. So that one is harder for me to measure, but in summary, The Mandalorian is definitely my fave Star Wars media as of right now. Probably not going to change for a while, or at least until the show ends, and even then I'll probably be too attached. But I just think it's excellent, and I really like the step it's taking towards expanding the Star Wars universe and how impactful I think it's going to be. And that's something we're going to discuss in the future of this podcast as well. So stay tuned. But if you ever need a Mandalorian fun fact, feel free to tweet me. My Twitter is in any information you can access about this podcast, and you can just ask me some questions, or if you're listening to this through YouTube, you can comment. Feel free to just go ahead and ask. So, upcoming Star Wars projects. We have so many, and I thank the Lord for that because I am now spoiled. A child of the Disney Plus Star Wars era, we have been given so much content that the thought of right now, season 3 of The Mandalorian not coming out has been immensely painful. When in reality, we used to have to wait years and years for new movies and new trilogies, and I can't even imagine being a fan from when Return of the Jedi, Return of the Jedi came out until The Phantom Menace, because that was over a decade, and I don't know if I could wait that long. I asked my dad that a lot, and he's like, yeah, I don't know. Especially not knowing if you were ever going to get new Star Wars content again, that just would have been painful. But basically, there's a lot that have been announced, but the ones that are coming, we know are coming in 2022, are the Book of Boba Fett, The Bad Batch Season 2, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Andor, and hopefully, I pray, The Mandalorian Season 3. So I'm kind of just going to go through each one and talk about what I've heard, why I'm excited for them, why they're relevant, just random things about these projects that I'm hype about. So the Book of Boba Fett, I'm going to go into more detail coming up because obviously it's coming, and as of today, I think it's 18 days. So it's coming up soon. I will address that. That'll be the last part of this episode. So we'll skip over that respectfully for now. And we'll go to the Bad Batch Season 2, because I don't know if it's been confirmed, but I would not be surprised if that's the next thing we get after Boba Fett comes out. So I really enjoyed Season 1 of the Bad Batch. I really did. I know that there were varying critiques about it, but I enjoyed it a lot. I think it was really fun. You know, there were a few episodes we had that didn't seem like they were contributing a whole lot to the overarching plot, but that's what a show like The Bad Batch does. It has so many episodes in a season, and sometimes we have to remember that these kinds of shows are not just geared toward us adultish or Star Wars fans, like it's family content. So some of it, of course, is going to be geared towards the kids. And I think The Bad Batch, you know, definitely also with the animation and such. Not that animation is childish. I don't know what to expect for season 2. I'm not 100% sure where Dave and the team is going to take it. I think there's a lot of places we could go. You know, Omega crossing paths with Boba, maybe? I don't think so, because you would think that he would be searching her out in the movies or in The Mandalorian or in the Book of Boba Fett, but we haven't seen the Book of Boba Fett yet, so maybe that does happen. But I don't know what to really expect for that. Obviously, we got a pretty big hint at the end of the season 1 finale with the cloning people and Lama Su, I think, right? I need to rewatch The Bad Batch. Lama Su getting taken to the facility, the same uniform as Dr. Pershing from The Mandalorian. I think we're going to go on a crazy ride. Obi-Wan Kenobi, arguably already the biggest show of 2022, and hasn't even come out yet. You get any news on that show, and it's going to be trending on Twitter. The power of that show, because it's such a beloved character that we're about to follow. I am so excited to get this project. I never thought we ever would, and here we are, and it's getting closer, and it's just, I'm so hype. Obviously, if you've been following that news, we're going to get Obi-Wan's rematch with Vader, and I think that this is going to be so sick. We get the Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen reunion, and that is just already amazing in and of itself. And I'm thinking that Qui-Gon is going to be in this show, because I don't see how he wouldn't be, considering what this show should be, like what the point of this show should be. I mean, if you watched the Mortis arc in the Clone Wars, you know that Obi-Wan sees Qui-Gon, and that Qui-Gon is like, you know, disappearing as a Force ghost, and Obi-Wan's like, what the heck? And then at the end of Revenge of the Sith, Yoda was like, oh, on Tatooine, Qui-Gon will teach you how to become a Force ghost. And so I think that we should really see that. And Liam Neeson's been playing pretty coy when it comes to interviewers asking him about his involvement in Obi-Wan Kenobi, but we know how people be when it comes to that, and these actors are put in these really hard positions. You know, it's tough. It's tough. And then, of course, we get Deborah freaking Chow, and she was amazing with her work on The Mandalorian, so I am so excited to see her take on Obi-Wan Kenobi, and it means that the action's going to be pretty sick, because the action in chapters 3 and 7 of The Mandalorian were amazing, especially chapter 3. And then there's Andor, which it is such a joy to talk about this show, because I feel like nobody does. And that's so upsetting to me, because Cassian has always been one of my favorite characters ever since Rogue One came out. And I think that this show has a lot of flexibility in what it can explore in the Star Wars universe. This is a time period that, yes, has been covered by things like Star Wars Rebels and the first movie, A New Hope, and, you know, I don't think... Actually, maybe that's the only stuff. Maybe there's novels and comics. Again, I'm sorry. This is just your average Star Wars fan here who knows a lot more about the visual media. But I think that it's going to be really cool to get, like, this maybe darker side of the rebellion, of assassins and intelligence problems and such. I think that this show is going to be really, really exciting and riveting and unpredictable and all around just a really fun experience. And I'm wondering, since Cassian uses Fulcrum in the same way that Ahsoka did and that Callus did in Rebels, if we'll see Cassian interact with Ahsoka at all. But I think it would be cool if that happened, but I'm not sure. So we'll see. I'm very excited for Andor. We should all be hyped for it. And then, of course, season 3 of The Mandalorian. Again, next week's episode is kind of going to go, I'm going to go more into this. But from what I've heard so far, potentially, with a potential slight leak, so I guess if you don't want any kind of potential spoilers, just skip ahead a bit, is that Din Djarin becoming the Mandalore or helping Mandalore is going to be essential to the plot of season 3, which I'm not surprised by. Based on the ending of season 2, that seemed exactly where this was going to go, by getting Bo-Katan and Casca back involved into all of this, and the fact that at the beginning of chapter 16, Bo-Katan was like, if you complete your mission, you should come help us, and Din was like, yeah, I don't see why not, and he's got the Darksaber, so I think it's going to be really cool to focus on Mando's character growth in that way, and to see him step into this leadership position. Since he's my favorite character, of course, I'm excited about that, but because I love Grogu, and I would never take away anything we've had with him, but because of his surprise involvement, we haven't really gotten what we were told we were going to get in the marketing for season 1, which is the story of Mando. So I really hope that we just get a lot more of that in season 3. So now, the Book of Boba Fett. It is coming so soon, December 29th. Everybody mark your calendars if you haven't already. I have a countdown going on the whiteboard outside my dorm door. It's pretty sick, if I do say so myself. And there's not a whole lot we know about this show, I think. There's not a whole lot I know about this show. One thing that, of course, I've heard and looked into a lot myself is possible Din Djarin cameo. This shouldn't surprise you at this point in this podcast episode if you've been listening to how much I love that show and that character. But when the first trailer for the Book of Boba Fett came out November 1st, a lot of us thought that Pedro Pascal's voice was in the trailer at this one part when it says, "I know you sit on the throne of your former employer." I think it's the quote. And I listen to that a lot because I'm very familiar with Din/Pedro's voice. I watched a lot of Pedro's cinematography, like his movies and his shows back in early 2020. So I'm pretty familiar with the way that he talks and his acting and body language and whatnot. And it sounded like somebody trying to sound like him, not so much like actually him. So my theory in that was, I think it was a week or two after the trailer came out, a picture was posted on Instagram by somebody who works for Skywalker Sound that they took with Pedro in the studio. So if you're not a big Pedro fan, he is working on The Last of Us, which is a TV show adaptation of a video game. And that's filming in Canada, I think. I don't know. I'm not as up to date with Pedro as I used to be. And even though he's great. and I love him. So that's been keeping him busy while season 3's been filming. And so my prediction is that he wasn't able to film his Book of Boba Fett lines for a potential Din Djarin cameo until then. So since he couldn't do it until after the trailer came out, they just hired somebody or got somebody who sounded kind of like him to do the voice in the trailer. Or that's just not going to end up being Pedro at all, and that it was just a coincidence that he sounded like him. It just didn't sound exactly like him, so that's why a lot of us are hesitant to say that it was him. But if it ends up being Din, and it ends up sounding different, my theory was right. But if not, then whatever, I don't really care if my theories are right or wrong. I just like to enjoy things. And if you saw the most recent TV spot / trailer, teaser trailer that they dropped, you can see a moment where Boba and Fennec are looking down into the grate on what was Jabba's menagerie and where the Rancor was when Luke got dropped in there. And I'm wondering if, obviously we know that Rancor is dead, but Moochie maybe from the Bad Batch? And I really hope that is, I think it was Moochie was the Rancor's name. But if you haven't watched the Bad Batch and you haven't seen Moochie, Moochie was a Rancor that the Bad Batch rescued as a job for somebody named Sid. And we've all been wondering, is Moochie going to come back? Because Bib Fortuna was the one who was asking for Moochie. So I think it would be pretty cool if, like, Bib Fortuna had Moochie somewhere and then brought Moochie out. And now Boba and Fennec are keeping Moochie for diplomatic purposes. I think it would be really fun to see Moochie. I'm curious about this Twi'lek woman that we keep seeing, and obviously, I forget the actress's name, I'm so sorry. I will learn it once the show comes out. She's made an appearance in every trailer, and it's pretty clear she's gonna be some kind of important character, so I'm just wondering what her role in all of this is gonna be. I don't know, potential for a romantic interest. I'm not really sure if romantic interests is Boba's thing, and if they think that any of us really want that. I don't really care either way. Romance in Star Wars is like, it is what it is to me. Yeah, I don't know. I'm really curious to see how she's going to play into all of this. And maybe she ends up being some kind of spy for a crime syndicate that gets involved in Boba's ring, or she works for him, or I don't know. But I'm very excited to find out is why I brought that up. There are other things in the show that I would like to see that I don't know for sure are going to show up. So, of course, like I mentioned, the Din Djarin cameo, I would love, love, love to see him again because, again, it has been a year and I have been spoiled as a Star Wars fan, so it's been a hard year getting no new content aside from the behind the scenes of season 2. I think that's the only new content we've gotten, and that's just people like Pedro and Latif and Brendan and Barry in the suit. Yes, I know everybody who's been in the suit, or at least the people who have shared that they've been in the suit. I don't know if anybody else has. So I would really love to get some new Din Djarin content, but only if it doesn't overshadow anything in the episode he's in or just in the show in general, because I know that when/if that happened in The Mandalorian season 2, it wasn't my favorite thing if it took away from like Mando/Din, because it's his show, you know, so I don't want Din Djarin's cameo to take away from Boba Fett. But Dave and John and Robert Rodriguez seem like they really got a good handle on it, so I'm not worried for really anything because I trust them a lot. I've never really consumed content from any of them and been dissatisfied. Because yes, I did watch We Could Be Heroes, which was directed by Robert Rodriguez because Pedro Pascal was in that. So, you know, I was watching all of his stuff and it was a kid's movie, but it was fun. Anyway, now that I went off on that tangent, I just think this show is going to be absolutely nuts, and I think that Boba Fett is just going to go crazy all the time and in these amazing fight sequences, and I'm so excited to just get a Star Wars show that's just like Boba Fett beating people up and intimidating people for, I think it's 7 episodes, they said? No, 8. Maybe it's just 8. I forget. I need to look it up. I'm sorry. That's me slacking. I think it is just 8. That would make sense because The Mandalorian's 8 episodes, but they announced it. I just forgot. I'm sorry. Please don't take any of that as fact. But just getting all those episodes of just Boba wrecking people and just being a crime lord, essentially, is going to be kind of fun because we don't get to explore this morally gray area of Star Wars often. So I think it's going to be cool to know, and I know Ming-Na Wen, who plays Fennec, kind of hinted at this or said it, that Boba Fett and Fennec are not really the good guys, but they're not the bad guys. Like, we're going to be rooting for them, but they're not necessarily going to be in the right. And I almost think that Din Djarin, if he cameos, is going to try to be a voice of reason for them. Like, hey guys, maybe you shouldn't be doing all this, or maybe you shouldn't be killing these people. And because he's kind of got a moral compass now, thanks to Grogu. But who knows? It's just going to be cool to see a grittier side of Star Wars and just all of that good action and intimidation. It'll be a fun time. But something else I hope for this show is that I know it's the Book of Boba Fett, so we're going to be exploring Boba Fett, how he survived the Sarlacc pit, and getting some of that backstory, and then going ahead and seeing what he's now up to. And having Fennec there is going to be awesome. And I just really hope that that them working together, we'll at least get to see Fennec and how people think of her separately from Boba. So, for example, Boba Fett is obviously probably a renowned name in the galaxy at this point. Like, people know he was working for Darth Vader, and he was one of the best bounty hunters, if not the best bounty hunter in the galaxy, and he's got a legacy. So I'm sure when people see him, they're like, oh, this is Boba Fett. We don't want to mess with this guy. I just want to see that same reaction for Fennec, because in Chapter 5 of The Mandalorian, when Toro tells Din, like, oh yeah, my bounty is Fennec Shand, Din's like, immediately knows who she is. She's an elite mercenary, and she's worked for the Hutts, and all this stuff. So I would really like to see if other people know that, and if they see her, especially with Boba Fett, they're like, oh man, like, this is so bad. I think that would be a really fun thing to explore. And Fennec is a really cool and strong character, and so I'm just excited to kind of dive into that, because obviously she doesn't have her own show, so I consider this to be like Boba Fett and Fennec Shand's show. I hope that you enjoyed today's pilot episode. Thank you so much for listening. Next week, we're going to be talking a little bit more about Boba Fett, if there's any updates between now and the next week I record this. And we're also going to go in depth on The Mandalorian, Season 1 and Season 2 especially, kind of just recapping, covering some details and some other maybe areas of opinions and controversies or whatever that I want to give my own opinion on. And then we'll also be looking at the key details going into Season 3, so maybe some more of my Season 3 theories or other things I've heard and just what we can expect from that show. So I thank you again for joining me, and as always, as they say in the Star Wars universe, may the Force be with you.